Elena Singanli, and today I brought you guys a new book to share. For people who are interested in politics and history will find today's video interesting. The title is States and Social Revolutions, a comparative analysis of France, Russia, and China by Theda Skopel. In today's video, I'll be going over these contents. First, a brief introduction about the author and the book. Second, the book review session. I'll mostly go over the first two parts of the book regarding the introduction in part one. Then I will reflect on the book, talking about the characteristics and tones of the book, as well as my own insights in applying the author's logic to another event in history, which is just a little spoiler here, the Industrial Revolution and the eruption process. Well, it is very fascinating and intriguing that caught my sight from the very first introduction of the book. I especially enjoyed the logical flow of this book and the overall insight the author has brought throughout the book and her way of writing. As I have a great interest in political history, I decided to read this book as this book seemed very related with my interest in major. I will be explaining this further in the book review part, but social revolutions hold much significance in politics, history, and society. Hence, understanding the causes, processes, and results of the social revolutions from history, especially prominent ones from France, China, and Russia, would help me widen my perspective in studying politics and history. And that is why I decided to read this book. And these two questions, I think, is the questions that this book and the video would answer. What causes a revolutionary crisis to occur? And second, how effective or beneficial is the comparative method in analyzing political history? And the bigger question the book is offering an answer to would be related to anything that questions social upheavals and revolutionary reforms in a society. Understanding the past history of social revolutions and being capable of successfully analyzing it, drawing out a common and general pattern out of it, would account for certain guidelines that could be used when dealing with future social revolutions or bring a change by social revolutions. Okay, moving on. First, let's learn about the author and the book itself. The author is Theda Skopel, Victor S. Thomas Professor of Government and Sociology at Harvard University. In 2007, Skopel was awarded the Johann Skytte Prize in Political Science for her visionary analysis of the significance of the state for revolutions, welfare, and political trust, pursued with theoretical depth and empirical evidence. The Skytte Prize is one of the largest and most prestigious in political science and is awarded annually by the Skytte Foundation at Uppsala University to the scholar who, in the view of the foundation, has made the most valuable contribution to the discipline. Skopel's books and articles have been widely cited in political science literature and have won numerous awards, including the 1993 Woodrow Wilson Award of the American Political Science Association for the best book in political science for the previous year. According to her website, her other research interests are American politics, political sociology, and comparative historical sociology. In our book today, it will be most related with the last mentioned one, the comparative historical sociology. What comes into your mind when you hear the word comparative? Comparing something, analyzing two or more different things in one stage, so to trace some parts similar and different? Yes, sure. That is the general and widely accepted idea of adopting a comparative method, and that aligns with what Skopel is doing when she is dealing with social revolutions too. And it will be also intrinsically linked to our book today, States and Social Revolutions. The full title of the book is States and Social Revolutions, a comparative analysis of France, Russia, and China. This is a book published by Cambridge University Press in 1979. As seen from the title, this book examines the causes and circumstances of social revolutions, deploying the comparative method among the French Revolution of 1789, the Russian Revolution of 1917, and the Chinese Revolution of 1911. So I personally found the introduction part most interesting, as I thought the introduction contains a lot of information and explanations of what make this book unique, and the author's analysis stand out from other existing scholars, despite that it also elaborates upon the popular topic of social revolutions and prominent examples from history. It made me think that the author is very shrewd and successful in persuading the readers why they should read her book and believing in how the author casts the familiar topics in new lights. In page 3 to 5, Skopel writes that social revolutions transform societal structures with a prominent role of class. It has always been like that throughout history, and their significance both in national and international scope. Social revolutions hold significance in historical, societal, and political contexts as it holds account to the decline and birth of regimes and the emergence of universal ideologies and dominant values. It is worth paying attention to the unique features of social revolutions in two parts. One, in their complex nature that denies crudely generalized explanations as cause of change. Two, in their combination within the two coincidences of societal structural change and political social transformations. This distinguishes social revolutions from mere revolutions or mere rebellions, which does not create structural change even if it involves revolts of subordinate classes, and also from political revolutions, which does not change social structures but only state structures. The author finds social revolutions as having a complex nature, successful transformations, which makes her study of them distinct from any existing ones, especially in her approach of taking a structural view and comparative historical analysis. Delving more into the concept of social revolutions, in page 14 to 16, Scopo writes that the common four-step processes among the leading perspectives on social revolution, or what she calls as the generic revolutionary process, is as follows. 1. Changes in society provokes grievances, dissatisfaction, collective incentives for mobilization of the emerged new class. 2. A deliberate mass-based movement occurs accompanied by ideology that consciously informs to abdicate the current government and social order. 3. Revolutionary movements combat with existing authorities and dominant social class. 4. If wins its own, new authority is established. However, this dominant generic revolutionary process never questions the premise that there must be a purposive, deliberate effort of bringing together the leaders and followers under the same goal of abdicating the existing authority for a social revolution to occur. The purposive image here is what the author regards as a part of popular analysis yet fallacious. Here are some dominant perspectives that incorporate it. Tedger's argument that highlights a leader's role in organizing the mass discontent expressed for a revolution to be actualized, and Chalmers Johnson's idea of the values promoted by revolutionary movements that turns the prevailing personal disorientation, and Tilley's focus on the psychological and ideological causes for the popular support of the revolution, and Marx's emphasis on the purposive movements as a necessary condition for successful revolution transformation. Within the prominent voluntarism in Leninism and Maoism, and the class consciousness stressed by Western Marxists like Lucas and Gramsci are all within the same line in stressing the purposive image. Then, what is wrong with the purposive images of how revolutions develop? The author answers primarily that being pertinent to purposive image of the revolutionary process persuades social structural theories to become social psychological ones. It makes revolution crisis to stem only from the emergence of dissatisfied people, mobilizable groups for revolution despite the various causes within the circumstance, and also as if the devastation of the old regime only occurs by the accomplishment of the aforementioned efforts. This inevitably makes analysts to find mass dissatisfaction and people's consciousness about the oppositional goals as central problematic issues. Yet, the author further explains that the concepts of societal order in terms of consensual and voluntaristic approaches are quite naive. More specifically, she elaborates on page 17 upon the fallacy purposive images contain within multiple parts. The cause, process, and outcomes when compared with the actual social revolutions from history. As for causes, Scopo says that no successful social revolution has ever been made by a mass mobilizing a violent revolutionary movement. She brings a quote from Jeremy Bencher. In fact, revolutionary movements rarely begin with a revolutionary intention. This only develops in the course of struggle itself. It is true that revolutionary organization and ideologies helped cement the solidarity of radical vanguards before and during revolutions, and also facilitated the establishment of new regimes, but in no sense did such vanguards with large, mobilized, and ideologically imbued mass followings alone ever created the revolutionary crisis they exploited. Instead, as mentioned in further chapters, the revolutionary situations have developed through the emergence of political, military, crisis of state and class domination. Also, the purposive images mislead about the process and outcomes of historical revolutions as it is about their causes. It makes the notion to become too simple, claiming that the revolution processes and outcomes are influenced and understood in terms of the activity and intentions or interests of the key groups who launched the revolution initially, when in actual historical revolutions, differently situated and motivated groups become participants in complex unfolding of multiple conflicts. The revolutions were not controlled by a single class or group, no matter how seemingly central they might appear in the revolutionary processes. Rather, they were powerfully shaped by socio-economic and international conditions and have proceeded in different ways depending upon how each revolutionary situation emerged from the start. Now, let's move on to the next part of the book review. From this part, the author has moved on from defining the necessary terms needed for her analysis and justification of such methods of her analysis to the actual main subject of the book. A comparative historical analysis among the revolutions occurred in France, Russia, and China. Starting from page 40, Scopel explains why she chose the following three countries. Why France, Russia, and China? I also was curious about this, as yes, it is true that French revolutions are famous and perhaps Chinese revolutions and Russian revolutions too, but why them? I need a more concrete and logical explanation beyond the simple fact that they are widely known and popular to the general audience. And I believe that Scopel offered me a very good answer to this question. She writes that comparative historical analysis best works with few cases that share some features in common, and when grouping several cases together, the cases must be observed and scrutinized deliberately, and the standards for grouping them together should be explicitly mentioned. The author mentions that she chose France, Russia, and China as all of them had not gone through colonial domination or subjugation, which thus eliminates the complexity that needs to be considered when studying revolutions that happened under colonial settings. The settings of the revolutions were all in politically ambitious, agrarian states in which the old regimes were proto-bureaucratic autocracies that were forced to deal with economically and militarily superior competitors in their era. All the revolutions also, in their process, consolidation of revolutionary state power and incorporation of masses, widespread revolts by peasants and lower-class citizens occurred. They all resulted in a bureaucratic and centralized nation state that incorporated the masses and had potential power in the international stage. Scopel points out that there are abundant similarities to allow French, Chinese, and Russian revolutions to be in the same line, or brought together for the purpose of comparative historical analysis. French revolutions aligns with Russian and Chinese revolutions in that the peasants played a key role in defining and within the process and the resulting new regimes were not a liberal parliamentary one, but a more centralized and bureaucratic one. The Chinese Revolution gradually contributed to a communist regime that is much similar to the post-revolutionary Soviet regime. Also, it is expected that when these three countries are brought together, Scopel points out that there are abundant similarities to allow French, Chinese, Russian revolutions to be brought together for the purpose of comparative historical analysis. Scopel points out that there are abundant similarities to allow French, Chinese, Russian revolutions to be brought together for the purpose of comparative historical analysis. French revolutions aligns with Russian and Chinese revolutions in that the peasants played a key role within the process, and the resulting new regimes were not a liberal parliamentary one, but a more centralized and bureaucratic one. The Chinese Revolution gradually contributed to a communist regime that is much similar to post-revolutionary Soviet regime too. Also, it is expected that when French, Chinese, Russian revolutions are studied together in the author's method, much would be gained from it, all of which the current scholars who segregate them in separate categories would have failed to gain. The distinctive characters of the revolutions in world historical settings that stimulated other scholars to separate categories will be cast in new light, as studied against the shared backgrounds of patterns among the three revolutions. And also, there is no need to deny the characteristics and features each revolution carries that might be different from each other, but we should rather scrutinize the details and processes within each revolution that carries a high potential to be grouped together despite the initial differences that seem likely, according to Scopel. I thought this was an important point that demonstrates the author's embracing character. She is well aware of the potential counter-arguments that might arise when other scholars or the audience read her book. She does not deny that the French Revolution had bourgeois and liberal characteristics. She admits that Russian Revolution had extreme statism in its outcome, and Chinese Revolution had elements of national liberation struggle and within the process. While other scholars deny what Scopel claimed as her main argument, the fact that the three revolutions can be brought together in their common ground and fiercely defines their own stances, Scopel differentiates herself from others in her embracing character. She is the winner at the end of the day. She admits the counter-arguments, yet successfully defends her stance at the same time. And this is exhibited throughout the book when she further brings upon the structural similarities between the revolutions. Yes, she admits firsthand that the revolutionary crisis in France and China differed in that way, in that they were far apart culturally and geographically or geopolitically, and the decline of old regime occurred in different times and backgrounds. However, there still exist similar structural patterns and causal processes in the decline of the old regime. Both revolutions were a clash between the autocratic authorities and the dominant class. Also, after the case of 7 Years' War and the Sino-Japanese War, both France and China were defeated and got internationally humiliated unexpectedly. Hence, autocratic authorities began to attempt reforms, which the dominant classes like the gentry in China and the privileges in France were against. These autocratic attempts at revolution and modernization, as in the case of tax reform in France and reorganization in China, all assumed the political resistance of the dominant class forces too. Also, when discussing Russia, the author again admits that yes, Tsar Russia's revolutionary crises were geographically and culturally much different from Bourbon France and Manchu China. The author explains that the Russian Revolution has undergone contrasting circumstances from those of France and China, as Russia's revolutionary crisis developed only under the direct impact of defeats in war, while France and China's revolutions occurred in times of formal peace, as autocratic attempts at reforms were resisted by politically dominant, powerful classes. But I personally think that still, there lie similarities among the circumstances, as Russia has also lost the Russo-Japanese War, like France and China lost in 7 Years' War and Sino-Japanese War, which left room for international humiliation among the revolutionary eras. There would have been new groups of people powered by the ideology of Marxism that clashes with the traditional dominant classes in Russia too. And the author points out that it is necessary to scrutinize the overall similarities and specific differences of the patterns noted for Russia, France, and China's old regime. She says that this must also be considered when analyzing the pre-revolutionary Russia. Scopel continues by elaborating the characters of pre-revolutionary Russia, and I found this part fascinating, as there are explicit mentions about the achievements of Peter the Great, whom I regard as one of the greatest men from history. One big characteristic of pre-revolutionary Russia is in its imperial state structure and serf economy. Peter the Great, deploying the rudiments of personal autocracy built by Ivan the Terrible, successfully made a mixture of the traditional despotic Eastern regime governing style and method borrowed from the West. The new army was established, and Russia's massive military machine used modern technology under Peter the Great. And Peter the Great's reform and style of governing was indeed unique and powerful in empowering Imperial Russia among the European nations. A rifle mixture and balance of the past and the present, or two different styles and features worked out perfectly under Peter the Great. Though it might not be totally similar, Peter the Great reminds me of Deng Xiaoping from China. As in Deng Xiaoping's famous saying, it doesn't matter if a cat is black or white as long as it catches mice. He remarkably accepted some capitalistic features within his regime, as he created special economic zones, which in turn brought lots of wealth from trade, and thus China experienced economic growth under its modernization efforts. Okay, going back to where we are, all revolutions that occurred in France, Russia, and China were centered within the old regime structures and situations as written in page 79. The actual occurrences of revolutions within the three countries especially depended upon the acceptance of aggregating social political structures of the old regimes to deal with peasant revolts. Also, throughout the book, two other players are brought to the table, and guess who they are? It is Prussia and Japan. The author points out that they too are the most prominent countries that is widely accepted as having gone through a successful modernization efforts. Scopel relates the two countries with our three players by claiming that the examination of the political causes of major restoration and Prussian reform movement aligned with the causes of revolutionary crisis in France, Russia, and China in page 79. She brings upon the similar difference analysis among the two and three countries. They are same in that all are subject to military pressures levied by economically developed nations abroad and have gone through societal political crisis. But the reason why we don't call the reforms in Prussia and Japan as revolutions, but instead call them reforms, is because it was only France, Russia, and China that plunged into the upheavals of social revolutions, while Prussia and Japan were capable of coping with the situation and adapting swiftly to the international demands through reforms with a top-down approach under the government so to not cause a revolution or chaos within the country. Different fates of the aggregate monarchical regimes are attributed to two causes. One, the severity of the international pressure each regime faced, and two, the relation between the production and dominant classes within state organizations. I've constantly pointed out the part about how defeats and wars and international humiliation played a role in stimulating the revolution in France, Russia, and China, when elaborating upon their similarities. A broader application of this cause with regards to other complex factors like one's country's economy and production factors also plays role in comparison between the three revolution countries and reform countries. Under the stress of World War I, Tsarist Russia remained entangled within the European state system. Although the imperial regime was fairly strong enough to carry out modernizing modernizing efforts, dismissing the dominant class interests after the defeat in Crimean War, the aggregate features that still prevail within the economy made it nearly impossible, to make up the lag between Western countries in their early industrialization era. In contrast, Japan and Prussia never were observed as being agriculturally backward or internationally pressed during the same era. France and China both had quite successful agrarian societies and economies and experienced international pressure just like Russia did. However, they differ in that in France and China, the landed upper class were present, which possessed institutionalized political power and exercised it over the central rule administrations. Therefore, the reactions of the politically organized and administratively entrenched classes' reactions to the autocratic modernist attempts deposed the monarchies and precipitated the decline of administrative and military organizations. This means that externally induced crisis developed into social revolutionary crisis. On the other hand, in the other case of Prussia and Japan, the aforementioned upper-class elites were absent, and therefore the old regimes were more bureaucratic, which made them capable of resolving external crises within the existing administrative arrangements and eliminate the possibility for social revolution stemming from the lower classes. Now, let's move on to the reflection section. First, about the book itself. I think that the overall tone is impartial and pragmatic, written for a knowledgeable audience who have a certain degree of interest within history and politics. Although the author kindly and deliberately guides the readers through her arguments, easy enough for strangers to the political history field to understand, I believe that her analysis and books would appear as more intriguing for the audience who already were interested in history and politics. This is because Couple's stance is groundbreaking and insightful, differing from the popular opinions and interpretations of social revolutions, which would be much more familiar to us too. Just like me, the book would be surprising to the readers as they encounter such an innovative and unconventional ideas from the author while reading the book. Also, the words and sentences used throughout the book were formal and academic. I personally also made a word list while reading the book to list words and or expressions that I didn't know yet would like to understand and use them in the future. Words like imbue, suzerainty, encumbrance, and phrases like nemesis of revolutionary hopes, hearty guffaw, impinged up are also in my list. Now, let's apply the overall book and Scopus logic with other events from history. I would like to first bring upon another type of revolution, not a social one, but the one relating to industry, namely the Industrial Revolution. There are multiple industrial revolutions in the past from the present, from the first industrial revolution with the advance of railroads to the fourth industrial revolution with the advance of the internet and artificial intelligence. There are differences, of course, but also similarities that lie in between the revolutions that occurred in the past and the present. As such, the first two industrial revolutions in the past and the third and fourth industrial revolutions in the recent past or present both involved invention of new instruments invented within the Industrial Revolution and technological developments that enhance interaction among people and change their social life, both then and now. The advent of instruments like the telephone and telegraph in the Second Industrial Revolution facilitated communication among people. The development of printing press enabled widespread access to books, and printed materials as printing became easier and faster than before, boosting literacy rates. The establishment of railroads and steam engines contributed to widespread development and contributed to making travel and transportation more affordable for the people. Similarly, the emergence of the internet guaranteed innovative benefits to these developments between personal relationships and connections. While many were estranged by its surroundings before, the development of the internet now guarantees individuals more chances of socializing with people from various communities, not bounded by territories. People can join a widespread community that shares the same interests and hobbies as one has through social networking sites that the internet offers. The dark sides, however, of technological advancements are also commonly found among different industrial revolutions. Unemployment of workers due to mechanizations or automation of industrial processes are found from the past as in the Luddite revolts and until today under the impact of computers and robots. The Luddite revolt would not be classified as a social revolution, but would rather be a political movement according to Scopel's definition in the introduction. They both are under the big theme of mechanization and automation, the dark sides of technological advancements in both past and present industrial revolutions, but the automated workforce nowadays is much more advanced. Also, loss of privacy due to improved surveillance technology and fraying of face-to-face human interactions because of social media are also found. While primarily it might seem that the industrial revolutions are different as they occurred in different time and in different circumstances, just like French, Russian, and Chinese revolution has done, when scrutinized, we can find many similarities that lies among the different revolutions, just like we have done, or just like the author has done in the different revolutions that happened in China, Russia, and France. Moreover, what came into my mind while reading this book was the Iran hijab protest. The ongoing Iran hijab protest, in my light, is in its way into developing as a social revolution. As Koppel mentioned in the introduction, social revolutions differ from mere rebellions and political revolutions in that social revolutions accompany both changes in social structure and political structure in a mutually reinforcing fashion or reinforcing way via severe socio-political conflict. Right now, the Iran hijab protest would be a mere political revolution that speak against laws that mandates women wearing hijab in public. But this could develop into a movement that stimulates social structure and political structure, as Iran is traditionally an Islam country that adopts sexist and discriminatory views. These views and practices, even if they were discriminatory, were naturally accepted by the people and thus was settled as a tradition or societal norm. Laws are passed, gender roles are rigid, women are shamed at public. Hence, when the protest now becomes successful enough to claim more rights for women, it will naturally change the societal and political orders that were previously intertwined with sexist and discriminatory notions. The real issue in the Iran protest is women fighting to take back control over their own bodies, or in other words, bodily autonomy and right to self-determination. It is a question not only of women not wearing the hijab, should they choose to, but also the manner and way in which they're allowed to dress, also whether they could put a makeup, lipstick, and nail polish in the public. This makes me think of another political liberalization movement, which was women's suffrage movement in the first industrial revolution. Women had increasingly important roles. They played economically and participated in economic activities accompanying the industrialization and increased need for labor. This circumstance prompted them to claim something more than before, as they were dissatisfied with their present or their current limited rights, just as French, Russian, and Chinese citizens wanted something different and to change from all that time, right before they came together and sparked a social revolution. Well, going back to the women's suffrage movement, the altered situation for women made them to no longer expect or actually fulfill their traditionally dominant roles to stay at home and maintain a submissive, compliant attitude to their husbands. In other words, it was the societal context provided by the Industrial Revolution and the situation created by economic developments that prompted these movements. Women in that era started to claim for tangible rights and equal treatment with men, especially about their suffrage and capacity to participate in politics. Although immediate expansion of suffrage was not what happened for women, the fact that women started to demand and make their voice matter is surely a remarkable reformist change during the 19th century. Okay, so that was for today's video. We have gone through the book States and Social Revolutions, a comparative analysis of France, Russia, and China, written by Tara Skopel. I first briefly introduced you guys about the author in the book, went over several intriguing parts of the book, and share my reflection on the book. I hope you have enjoyed it, and I strongly recommend you guys to read the rest of the book on your own, so to get a better understanding of Skopel's wonderful insight about social revolutions. Thank you for watching the video.